Good morning, this is Peter from ZIPP Media here in Weymouth, Dorset, UK. I think it is morning. Anyway, you find me this morning in Weymouth Museum. They're having a coffee morning and a volunteer day. So I just flip the camera around and you can meet one of the coordinators.
Good morning. I'm David Riches and I'm the museum manager. I'm a volunteer, like everybody else in the museum present, and we are holding a volunteering coffee morning today with the aim of recruiting more volunteers, and particularly we need more stewards and we need a new volunteer coordinator to take over from the lady that is retiring from that role.
Right, and it's very busy this morning. It's really busy. It's really busy this morning. Really busy this morning. Lots of people.
Yes.
Yeah. So can we start a little walkthrough of the museum? You wanted to show me this here.
So what we're looking at now is...
You just want to go forward and show people. You just want to go forward and show people. Okay. All right, there we are. All right, yeah, sure. So what are we looking at now?
So behind us we have a timeline which
Right.
illustrates the history of Weymouth from virtually prehistoric times up to the present day. And this has been constructed by one of our volunteers and is the introduction really to the museum and its gallery.
Right. Okay.
The museum gallery itself starts here, and behind me we have some displays of items from the collection, and particularly in the first cabinet and adjacent to it we have a long case clock which is Dorset manufacture, which was housed in the brewery boardroom. And adjacent to that, we have two weather recording instruments. We have a barograph, and we also have a barometer.
Right.
And the barometer is a special one that was designed basically to provide more accurate weather information for people going to sea, for instance, for fishermen.
Right. Okay, the next case. The next case is a little unusual because they are German. This case here with the sou'wester.
In the case next to us now, we have a selection of items that relate to the German U-boat U-249,
Right.
which surrendered at the end of the war and was brought into Weymouth Harbour. And a number of items were given by the crew to local people. Some of these are on loan to the museum at present, and some of the items are actually in the museum collection.
Right.
Adjacent to the case,
some of the pictures.
we have a description of the U-249 surrender, and we have a nice painting that actually illustrates U-249 being escorted into Weymouth.
Right. That was. I heard rumours that happened. Now I can actually see it.
Yes, there were in fact, I believe, two German submarines that actually came into Weymouth. U-249 was one of them.
Right.
One of the items on loan to us, in fact, is some binoculars that were given to the officer that was involved in the surrender,
Right.
by the captain of the U-boat, and they have been lent to us by the son of that person.
Right. So the next case is the. Should we do this side? Weymouth weights and measures.
So what we have here are a collection of weights and measures that would have been used by the equivalent of the Trading Standards Organisation. The oldest one is in fact a corn measure, and that one is I think about 300 years old.
Right.
The other measures are mostly later. We start with measures from 1825, and they are 1825 because in 1824 a new set of measures became standard, known as the Imperial Measures.
Right.
Prior to that, for instance, a wine gallon was different to an ale gallon, which would have been different from a gallon of water.
Right.
But with the introduction of the Imperial Measures, all gallons were the same. And obviously new measures were required. So we have an 1825 Weymouth set there. We have a later set as well.
Right.
The cylindrical measures are essentially for measuring grain. For measuring liquids, you get the conically shaped measures.
Right.
And then on the extreme left here, we have a petrol measure. It's one of a set of petrol measures we have. This is actually the smallest one. They actually go up to, I think, 5 gallons in size.
They're beautifully
We
made,
also have
aren't they?
sets of weights, a standard inch,
Right.
and also the smallest of a set of 3 scales that we have in the collection.
Right. Next one is Weymouth Souvenir China.
Weymouth, being seaside town, provided from its shops souvenirs of all sorts for visitors to the town. And one of the most popular ones were various types of china, and they range from domestic china to models of different things. So we have a selection here. We have quite a large collection in the museum, which we have a selection of on display. There are 2 types. There are those that show views of Weymouth, and there are those that just have a crest showing the arms of Weymouth, Weymouth and Malcolm Regis.
Right. So the next one is recent donations.
We are very fortunate that we are continually receiving donations of additions to the collection, and I try every year to put a display of these in a case so that the public can see, and it also encourages, of course, people to make further donations.
Absolutely.
So what we have here, we have a model of the Old Fleet Church.
Right. Let's see if I can get down and get that. There we are. Yes. The Fleet Church. There we are. Okay.
We have a child's gas mask from World War II.
Right.
We have 2 souvenir medallions from the visit of George III, and these are dated, I think, 1795. And then on the upper shelf, we have part of a large collection relating to the artist Robert Standish Sweeney.
Right.
And we will see some of his artworks as we go further around.
Right. Okay, so we come to the English Civil War next.
The English Civil War was quite important from Weymouth because there were battles here between both parliamentary and royalist forces, and the war raged back and forth. There's also a tale of conspiracy known as the Crabchurch Conspiracy.
Right. And this is
the artifacts that we see here are on loan from a local reenactor who is a specialist in the English Civil War.
That would be Mark Vine.
It is Mark Vine.
Mark Vine, absolutely.
Yes.
I just thought to give Mark a mention. Yes, fine. So we move on from the Civil War and the Crab Church to Tudor and Stuart. Tudor and Stuart next.
We have a mixed collection of items here from the Tudor and Stuart period. In fact, mostly I think from the Stuart period rather than the Tudor period. Particular interest is the large overmantel that we've got.
Right.
We don't actually know exactly where in Weymouth it came from. It's been in the collection of the museum for a long time. It's rather interesting when you look at it and comparing it with ones that I've seen, for instance, in Bristol. I think it's probably from a merchant's house.
Right. It's pretty fancy, isn't it?
Then we have the Priory Chair.
Right.
Because there was in Weymouth at one time a priory. And then we have a 16th century chest that was from, I'm trying to think what her name is. Stop a minute. Oh.
It was from the January 1506, rather unexpectedly, Queen Joanna of Castile in Spain and her husband Archduke Philip of Austria came ashore in Weymouth. They were both suffering from seasickness following a terrible gale in the Channel. Rather hurriedly, the Sheriff of Dorset, Sir Thomas Trenchard, rode to Weymouth to deal with these highborn visitors. I'm reading from the little caption here. He gave them temporary hospitality in his home, Wolferton House, near Dorchester, before they were summoned to London by King Henry the VII. They were alleged to have left behind the rather splendid iron-bound chest. So it's this one we're looking at now. The chest descended to Colonel Pickard Cambridge, who lived in Stanton Court, Greenhill, Weymouth. When he died in 1896, the chest was bought by Weymouth and Melcombe Regis Town Council and presented to Sir Richard Howard of Greenhill House, a leading inhabitant of the town. When he died in 1905, the chest came back to the town council and eventually passed to the museum. Now, a nice bit of local history there that's maybe not known.
Moving on in time to the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, we have King George III as a regular visitor to the town.
Right.
And he visited the town on many occasions between 1789 and 1805. So we have a number of items relating to that. Particularly there's an engraving of the royal party coming into Weymouth, and then there's a cartoon relating to the visit of King George III, and he is actually being met by the mayor.
Right.
And it was customary at the time that the mayor, of course, should kneel.
Right.
But in fact, and he was reminded of this by one of the King George III's party. Unfortunately, he couldn't.
Right.
He had a wooden leg.
Right. So
And
it's
that's what the
impossible.
cartoon is. And then the picture below shows Gloucester Lodge.
Right.
And Gloucester Lodge...
That's the big hotel on the seafront now.
So
That's the big hotel on the seafront now.
it is the big hotel that's there, although of course it's been extended another floor higher
Sure.
now, and a lot of other changes to it. And of course there was a major fire there as well at one time. But yes, Gloucester Lodge was where the king stayed on his visits. There are two other interesting things relating to King George III. There are some letters. There's a silhouette.
Near the bottom.
And some items relating to his daughter and a lock of her hair. And then we move on to a display about Thomas Fowler Buxton. Thomas Fowler Buxton, of course, was an important resident of Weymouth and Weymouth's MP at one time, and he was very much a campaigner against slavery.
Right.
And that's what he is best known for. And there is a recently erected monument to Thomas Fowler Buxton, which is up on Bincleaves.
Right. So
it is 150 years, of course, since the first official Weymouth lifeboat. And so we've got a display here that is celebrating that centenary.
Here we are.
And we have a number of items. So we have, over this side, we have a painting showing the various coxswains up to, in fact, I think it's 1989.
Right.
We have another painting below showing the lifeboat conducting a rescue. Both these paintings are by John Lee. We have a poster naming for the naming ceremony of the lifeboat Tony Vanderbilt, which was the previous permanent lifeboat to the present one.
Right.
And we have one of the name boards from it. We have a stone from the lifeboat house, and then on this side we have a couple of photographs from the collection of Weymouth lifeboats, and one of the boards showing all the rescues that the lifeboat conducted in this case from 1935 to 1940. We have a large set of these boards from the RNLI. Unfortunately, we can only display one at the moment.
Sure. Okay, we come around the corner now, and this is the Earl of Abergavenny.
Weymouth, of course, and Portland are well known for shipwrecks. It's quite a treacherous part of the coast.
Right.
And one particular wreck is that occurred in 1805 of an East Indiaman called the Earl of Abergavenny. And the Earl of Abergavenny ran aground on the Shambles and subsequently refloated off the Shambles to make for Weymouth Beach.
Right.
But it didn't get to Weymouth Beach before it unfortunately sank because the damage to the hull was much greater than they had thought. Over many years, divers investigated the wreck and produced a detailed plan of where all the various artefacts were and what the state of the wreck was and so on. We have a selection of these artefacts on loan to us, which we now have on display.
Right. So we move on. This is the kind of main case of the Abergavenny. This is stuff that was found in the wreck. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah?
One of the things that actually is of particular interest to me is these pencils.
Right.
Only one other example, I think, is actually known, which was also recovered from a wreck off Australia. These are actually pencils in which the lead can be replaced. And there were quite a number of them as part of the ship's cargo.
So they had replaceable pencils even then?
That's right, yes.
Amazing, isn't it?
But lots of other items, some of them domestic items, some of them items from the cargo, large numbers of gun flints that we can see at the bottom there.
Right.
Back where we were originally, some lead ingots. And there's 3 lead ingots on loan to us there.
Right. So, James and Caddy.
So Weymouth has always been a centre, until recently anyway, for building boats, smaller ships and boats. And one local firm called James and Caddy, and they no longer exist, but in the 1950s, 1960s, they were quite prominent boat builders and built a range of boats, and we have on display 2 out of 4 models that we have of the boats that they produced. Models were actually produced by their chief designer, and chief designer now retired, in fact donated the models to us.
Right.
Interestingly, the upper model is a half model, looks like a full boat, but in fact what you're looking at is a reflection in the mirror at the
Yes,
back.
of course, yes. That's very, very clever. We have the
Right.
big Weymouth sign.
Next to it we have the nameplates from the West Country class locomotive Weymouth.
Right.
These are actually the 3rd nameplates. One set were on one side of the locomotive, one set on the other, and one set was presented to the town at the
Right.
naming ceremony.
Right.
And this happened at a lot of the towns because West Country class were named after various towns in the West Country. So we have the set for Weymouth, which was presented to the council.
Right.
There's actually a picture of the locomotive on the Golden Arrow below it. Then we have a display which portrays Weymouth transport through the ages. So again, it's in the form of a timeline with the oldest pictures at the top and the newest at the bottom. And we cover both road transport, rail transport and sea transport. And someday we'll have to update it because even the latest is now out of date.
Yes.
We no longer have Condor,
No.
we no longer have trains running down the quay, and we no longer have little minibuses, fortunately. But and then up until recently, the services to the Channel Islands were a very important feature of Weymouth Harbour and Weymouth. And this display it concentrates on that, and we have a model of the ferry St Julian.
Right.
The St Julian came into service in the 1930s. During the war she served as a hospital ship, and then after the war she returned to service until the St Julian and its sister ship, the St Helier, were replaced by the Souvenir and Sweeney.
Right. And we have a lifeboat from Souvenir down there.
The Olympics in 2012, where Weymouth and Portland hosted the sailing competitions,
Right.
was obviously very important to Weymouth, and following on the tradition of naming locomotives, a Class 444 electric multiple unit was named Destination Weymouth, Team Dorset Destination Weymouth. Once again, the tradition was followed of making an extra plate, and the extra plate was presented to the Borough Council, and it is now on loan to the museum. And the picture below it actually shows the multiple unit on which it now resides.
There we are. Okay. So
Then
now
we move on to a
with the
brewery display.
Brewery.
Not surprisingly, because where we are now was in fact the site of 2 breweries.
Right.
And we're actually in what was the Hope Brewery, the Groves Brewery, with the Devonish Brewery adjacent to it.
Right.
In 1964, the two breweries merged. And then brewing continued until 1986, when the last brew was here, and after that brewing transferred to Redruth in Cornwall.
Right.
So we have a display here that illustrates the history of the breweries through from the mid 19th century onwards. In the adjacent cabinets we have items that have come from the brewery of one sort or another. So we have things like brewery labels, bottles, jars, and then some instruments that were actually used either by the brewers themselves or by Customs and Excise. So we have two hydrometers. One is actually known as a bait saccharometer, which is for measuring the sugar content
Right.
prior to the actual brew. And the other one is a Sykes hydrometer. And then we have slide rules that are used for actually calculating the alcohol content.
Right. Right.
And then over here we have a number of other items which range from the Devonish office brass plate, a malt shovel, a measuring rod for measuring the size of the cask, a thermometer which would be used within the vats,
Right.
and then we have a cabinet displaying a whole variety of stuff. So we have various jugs and mugs related to brewery. We have a Henry Crouch binocular microscope, which came from the brewery laboratory, along with some glassware, a set of scales. Below that, items such as the malt shovels and particularly one of the nameplates from the stables for the horses.
Right.
This is Demon.
Demon,
All the
yes.
Devonish horses had names beginning with D.
Right.
And we actually have quite a sizable collection of all the nameplates from the stables. And then we have more brewery equipment below, and we have a seal press for the brewery seal, and we also have a device which is actually used for punching number holes into labels.
Right. I remember when I first moved down here 30 odd years ago, on a Wednesday particularly, you could smell the hops in the air.
Yes.
It was a
Yes.
wonderful smell. So we moved to a schoolroom and Standish Sweeney.
We have quite a large art collection. One of the recent additions to that collection, which we mentioned earlier, is that of the artist Robert Standish Sweeney. Robert Standish Sweeney lived the later years of his life in Weymouth and produced quite a large number of paintings and engravings and pencil drawings of Weymouth in that period. And we're fortunate in having had a number of these donated to us, along with a lot of other items, by the Standish Sweeney Trust, when that was basically ceasing to exist and be wound up. And we actually have a self-portrait of the artist. It's one of, I think, probably 3 self-portraits that we have of him.
Right.
And then other views of Weymouth which we can see. And he particularly produced a lot of views of the tall ships during the tall ships races.
Right.
And so we have the Royalist illustrated there.
The school desk here. The school desk, where did that come from?
I'm not sure where this actual school desk came from.
Let's see.
It is a Weymouth school desk.
Yeah, let's have a look at the caption here. The school desk.
It's one of a number of school desks that we've actually got in the collection.
Right. It says, please open the desk and look inside. There we are. Look at that. That's copper plate. How you taught children to write copper plate. Yeah. Amazing.
One of the things we particularly consider important is to get children into the museum.
Sure.
So we have a whole corner of the museum that's specifically for children.
Right.
Not only do we have items on display which relate to childhood, but we have costumes and hats that they can try on.
There we are. Costumes and hats. Look at those.
We have a whole load of reproduction tesserae, which mean they can create their own tessellated Roman pavement.
Right.
We have views they can colour and work on here. We have bricks that they can play with.
Right. So it's completely family friendly.
It's very popular with children, and
Good.
And obviously therefore with their parents. And we have a number of items in the display as well, which are quite interesting, including a couple of items which came from the Old Holy Trinity School on Chapel Hay.
Right.
And this toy locomotive is one of those, and this letterboard as well. We also have a nice rocking horse from the school, which we had on display until earlier this year. We've put it into store now, and replaced it with other items.
Sure.
And quite an unusual high chair, which also converts into a rocking chair.
Right.
And that was donated to us about 5 or 6 years ago now.
Right. So this is the last exhibit, yes?
This is our costume display. We change the costume display twice a year.
Right.
We have a large collection of costume. If we look at the display case first, then what we are showing there is typical 1950s wedding dress and also a bridesmaid's dress.
Right.
I think the bridesmaid's dress is quite interesting, because of course we're talking about a period now where things were still rationed.
Sure.
In some cases, because rationing I don't think ended till 1955, and even if they weren't rationed, people didn't earn the sort of salaries that they do nowadays. Money was in short supply, materials were in short supply. So actually what happened in this case was that a wedding dress was converted into a bridesmaid's dress.
Right. And you can see, I'm always fascinated by the photography. This one looks like it's been artificially coloured.
Yes.
Hand coloured maybe.
And that's actually the wedding of one of our volunteers.
Right.
It's actually in.
Yes.
This is the wedding of another local resident.
Yeah.
And
You've
then
got,
we have a display of hats.
you got hats as well.
All 20th century hats, and some women's magazines of the period, and we've actually got some here which people can actually have a look at.
There we are.
And then we've
Right.
got two other quite interesting displays. We have an embroidered crest of the Dorset Regimen, and we also have
we've got quite a bit considering this is
an
only
embroidery
very
picture
a milliner's
of a woolen tapestry.
making not particularly, I don't think. It's just that there's it's just something that we had a lot of, and they changed that display.
And this
year. It
dates
was like
from
towards the age
1884.
last year. And then you've got the sort of
Worked by
wedding.
Lieutenant William
Fisher,
RN, and awarded a medal at Weymouth Town Exhibition, 1884. Yeah. So that's the end of the tour for the moment. So thanks for watching, and Weymouth Museum are still looking for volunteers, so come and join them. All right. Bye from Weymouth Museum for the moment.
Bye from me.
Bye bye.